Hello, I'm Ryan, and I'm going to be reacting to the most scariest woman in the Wild Wild West, and her name is Annie Oakley. So this is the scary life of Annie Oakley. Let's get into this.
Annie Oakley had become one of the most famous people in the United States. She was touring with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and astonishing audiences with her sharpshooting skills, performing trick shots like firing cigars out of people's hands, splitting playing cards edges on from 30 paces away, and
Whoa, shooting cigars out of people's hands, that seems deadly.
hitting targets with her back turned, rifle propped backwards over her shoulder, using only a small mirror to aim.
Oh wow.
At just 5 feet tall, this small woman had turned into a giant symbol of the romanticized Wild West. Her path to getting there was a dark and perilous one. But how much is myth, and how much is true? Welcome back to Nutty History. Today, we're exploring the trailblazing, talented, and tragic life of Annie Oakley, the Wild West's greatest sharpshooter.
So she was the greatest sharpshooter in the Wild West back in the 1800s. That is insane.
In 1875, at the ripe old age of 15, Annie traveled to Cincinnati to visit her sister. Word of her impeccable marksmanship, or markswomanship rather, had begun to spread around the region, and she was invited to a pigeon shooting contest with an Irish immigrant named Frank Butler, who was performing trick shots in a traveling show. Annie
It says Frank Butler. He was an Irish-American marksman who performed in the Wild West variety shows. It looks like.
won, at the horrible expense of what some sources say were 50 unfortunate birds. It was apparently love at first shot. The two ended up getting married, although no one seems to agree on when exactly. Regardless of precisely when it happened, Oakley and Butler began performing together. It was around this time that Annie Mosley became Annie Oakley. Annie herself never explained the reason for the name change. Some historians believe she took the name after the Cincinnati neighborhood she and Butler lived in before they hit the road. Others think she named herself after the mysterious stranger who bought her train ticket after she fled the wolves. Today's video is sponsored by one of the most popular Oakley and Butler performed their own traveling show for a while, but then in 1885, they joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West. Or wait, was it 1884? Maybe 1886. The dates are, again, kind of unreliable, but it was sometime around then. Buffalo Bill's Wild West by this point was in the process of taking the country and the world by storm. And Annie Oakley became a cornerstone of the show. She ended up being a headliner and the highest paid performer in the show, other than Buffalo Bill himself.
Oh wow, so she was getting paid really well.
People were flocking to see this small, unassuming woman pull off near miraculous feats of sharpshootery. Early on in her 15-year run at Buffalo Bill's Wild West, Oakley was already a master of the performing weapon arts. One night, while she was shooting cigars out of her husband's mouth and hitting dimes tossed midair, there was a spectator in the crowd who was particularly impressed, and particularly legendary in his own right. Sitting Bull was, well, sitting of course, watching Oakley do her thing and was blown away. Sitting Bull was an icon in the Native American resistance to the government, and he led one of the last major uprisings as the colonizers pushed west into Sioux territory, the Great Sioux Battle of 1876. He helped lead his people into the Battle of Little Bighorn, where Custer made his last stand, and the Sioux and Cheyenne would win a bittersweet victory as their lands were quickly taken from them and they were forced onto reservations. By the time Sitting Bull was sitting watching Oakley, he had already surrendered and had actually joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, acting out scenes of battles that he himself had fought in and lost loved ones over. Sitting Bull thought that Oakley must have been gifted with supernatural powers. Her aim was just too good. He reportedly paid $65 to have his picture taken with her that night.
That was probably a lot of money back in the days. $65 just to get a picture taken with her. I've heard of Sitting Bull before.
Which was an insane amount of money at that time, especially for a picture. In the months that followed, the two struck up a close bond, so close that Sitting Bull considered Oakley to be his adopted daughter, and he gave her the name Little Sure Shot, which Oakley would go on to use in all her performances thereafter. Oakley continued to gain status and fame into the 1890s. She toured Europe, wowing Queen Victoria in London and crowds in Paris with her absurd sharpshooting feats. In 1894, Thomas Edison took a small film of her shooting with his newly invented kinetoscope, producing a 25-second film of Oakley firing her weapon at various objects. In 1898, with tensions rising between the U.S. and Spain, tensions that would eventually spill over and lead to the Spanish-American conflict, Oakley wrote a letter to President William McKinley, urging him to allow her to create an all-female regiment of sharpshooters to aid in the cause.
Says McKinley was assassinated in 1901, it looks like. He was the 25th president.
Her offer was rejected. She wrote another letter in 1917, urging the Secretary of Battle to create a women's division to aid in that war effort. Again, her ideas were ignored. Oakley was undeterred, though. After a train accident in 1901 that left her unable to perform to the high standards she had set for herself, she turned her attention towards women's rights and the rights of children. She reportedly helped train more than 15,000 women to use weapons. She performed charity events, the proceeds of which went to help orphans, widows, and underprivileged women. She campaigned for equal pay for women in the workplace and the rights of women to participate in sports. There are foundations named after her that are active today that champion women's rights.
That's really cool.
Annie Oakley was born Phoebe Ann Mosley in 1860. Contrary to her status as a Wild West legend, she really wasn't from the Wild West. She was born in rural Ohio, which at the time was a bit more law-bound and established than the territories farther west. Still, though, life in rural Ohio wasn't for the faint of heart, and the young Annie Mosley had to deal with a ton of hardship and tragedy before she was even a teenager. When she was just 6, her father, a veteran of the War of 1812, died of pneumonia, leaving Annie, her mother, and her 8 sisters to fend for themselves. During the next few years, Annie learned to hunt and trap and sold her game to local grocers and hotels to support the family. She was a natural with a rifle, and by the age of 15, she had earned enough money to pay off the mortgage on the family home. But before that, in 1870, when Annie was just 10, tragedy struck once more when her stepfather died. With her family again pushed into poverty, Annie was sent to the Drake County Infirmary, also known as a poorhouse, where the elderly, the mentally ill, and orphan children were cared for if they had nowhere else to go. Things were about to get dark indeed for young Annie. After a few weeks in the infirmary, she was sent to live with a family in a kind of foster care / work exchange situation. Annie would help around the house, and the family would pay her 50 cents a week and see to her education.
50 cents a week? That's not much. That's like pocket change nowadays.
But according to Oakley's later autobiography, the arrangement basically turned into indentured servitude. The couple, whom she only referred to as the Wolves, or individually as he wolf and she wolf, were heartless, worked her to the bone, and wouldn't let her leave despite her pleas to return to her family. In her autobiography, Annie wrote that when she was caught falling asleep while knitting stockings, the she-wolf struck me across the ears, pinched my arms, and threw me out of doors into the deep snow and locked the door. I had no shoes on, and in a few minutes my feet grew numb. I was slowly freezing to death. So I got down on my little knees, looked towards God's clear sky, and tried to pray. But my lips were frozen stiff, and there was no sound. The wolves even wrote fake letters from Annie to her mother saying she was happy in attending school. Both were clearly lies. Annie eventually managed to escape and return to her family after receiving help from a mysterious man who paid her train fare to get home. She was still only 10 years old. The experience would haunt her the rest of her life, but she would eventually use it to campaign and raise money for the poor and mistreated. In her autobiography, Annie wrote, "People have asked me, but why do you give as you do? Why do you not spend more on yourself?" Her answer? "If I spend $1 foolishly, I see tear-stained faces of little children hurt as I was." Do you know any other facts about Annie Oakley that we didn't mention?
Okay, so pretty much she had a rough childhood, it seems like. She had to leave her, she was taken away from her family and she had to escape. But she was one of the best sharpshooters in all of the Wild West, which is really cool. And she did some insane stunts, shots, or should I call it a stunt? Not the performance, shooting a cigar out of the mouth and shooting cards and stuff. That's insane. You have to be so good at so good of the shot and not miss or not hit the person, because if you hit the person, that wouldn't have ended well. But wow, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, hit this video right here that YouTube recommends, hit the subscribe button, turn on the bell notification, and I'll see you on the next one.